Everyone says hi. I want to say a big thanks to all the sponsors that helped with this event going live. It will be a tough one without them, for sure. And I'm Stavros from Crystallize. I'm the host here. I'm not going to be doing the talk. That's Matt's job. And in case you haven't heard, Crystallize is basically a headless backend for your modern apps. If you're into GraphQL, you're into React, you're a developer that is totally up and in to check new tech, you should definitely go check it out. Crystallize, both Crystallize and of course all the other sponsors. One thing that I want to mention, because before I turn off my mic, I give it to Matt. I want to say that Auth0 is running also a challenge for all of the participants today. So basically, you can go check out their challenge. You have a chance to win one of the two headsets from JBL. You basically need to do a very brief implementation of a login service with Auth0. So be sure to check it out. You should have got an email if you registered. So yeah, without further ado, I'm out. Matt, it's all you now. For any questions to Matt regarding the talk, feel free to use the chat on YouTube, and I will pass it on to Matt to answer your questions after his talk is done. So yeah, that's all. It's all you, Matt.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, perfect. So my name is Matt Murphy, and I work here at Cognite as a software engineer. Can you guys still hear an echo? Hold on, let me. Stavros, did you mute? Okay, hold on, let me try something. Okay, maybe that's a bit better.
So guys,
oh
yeah, I think it's way better, Matt.
Okay, maybe that's a bit better. So, oh, I can still hear the echo. Okay, I hope everyone can hear me now and see my screen. So my name is Matt Murphy. I'm a software engineer here at Cognite. So first, a little bit about myself. I'm from Canada, so naturally, I love hockey. I was born skating pretty much since as long as I could walk. I played competitive hockey right up until I came here to Norway. I also love travel. I've had the privilege of spending time working in West Africa, in Vietnam, also Europe, Norway, obviously, and San Francisco. I love learning new things and reading. I'm currently learning Italian, so if you can speak any Italian, please send me a message. I'm also a freelance barber. I told everybody that I was talking today, and I'm going to talk about being a freelance barber, so we'll get more into that later. Here's also my GitHub and my Twitter if you need to reach out to me at any time with any questions about the talk. So the agenda for today. First, let's talk about why flexibility is important and how it's achieved in this traditionally rigid field. Data-intensive industries are old in some sense. It's oil and gas, it's manufacturing, it's transport. These things don't change that quickly. Flexibility has not been their top priority. Next, I'll talk about what we're building here, our stack and tooling, and how it enables flexibility. Then we'll talk a little bit about some code generation tools we use, and we'll do a bit of a deep dive into Cogen. We'll dispel some misconceptions, and we'll tie back in cutting hair here. Finally, we'll have some last words on Cogen and flexibility. So jumping right in. Why is flexibility important? So in data-intensive industries, their data is kind of trapped in some sense. There's a lot of potential that is untapped. Data is siloed maybe. Data is hard to access in many different source systems. And Cognite is kind of built on this idea. So what we're building here is a tool to promote flexibility in this rigid industry. And our stack looks like GraphQL. It's React front end. We also mix in some Apollo and a Neo4j database. We also use something called a GraphQL code generator for Cogen and a Neo4j GraphQL library. So you might ask, why a stack like this? Well, of course, we use a React front end because it's the best library for building UIs in the world. I think I'm allowed to say that because this is a React conference. GraphQL, because it's built with flexibility in mind. The goal of GraphQL is that you're only getting the data you need to get. And in data-intensive industry, this is so important because there's a lot of data. Oh, I see the video dropped again. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, Matt. Just on your presentation, what I can see that you're sharing is the why is flexibility important screen. That's what I can see.
Can you guys still hear me fine?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you, but if you can, all right, now we can. So basically what you're sharing now, just to give you an update, I can see the stack.
I hope everyone can still hear me here. So
yep.
Let's talk now a little bit about, let's dive deep into how we're doing achieving code generation here. So I'd like to make a bold claim and say that code generation is like cutting your own hair. Now, you might think that these are two completely different fields, but I'd like to dive in and see how we're using code generation and dispel some misconceptions about both cutting your own hair and code gen. It's a bit embarrassing to say, but I picked up this hobby when quarantine started and the barbers closed. I started dabbling in cutting my own hair. And it's something I really enjoy doing. It's something very good. I might have hyped it up a little bit too much. It's a lot less cool than cutting other people's hair, but it's like 90% just a dude looking in the mirror cutting his own hair. So misconception number one, both code generation and cutting your own hair are intimidating. When people think of code generation, they think of, I don't know, Skynet. They think of AI. They think of writing code. This isn't necessarily the case. It's not maybe not AI. It's not so difficult to grasp. And cutting your own hair is the same way. People don't want to do it because they're scared they're going to make a mistake. Maybe for the next few weeks they can't even look in the mirror. Oh, okay. I see. There's an issue.
All right, guys. I think we got some technical problems. That the only drawback about being in a live conference is that online, of course, is that you have some sort of, let's say, a pain point that is network. And I guess that's what happened with Matt. So I'll try get him in again as soon as possible. Hey, Matt, you're back.
Hey, can you guys hear me again?
Yeah, we can hear you. We get a little bit of a feedback, but I think it's good. Of course, the guys in the chat will let us know as well.
Sure.
But it looks like the slides are slightly off when you were presenting.
Okay. So which slide can you guys see now? Or
actually, we can't see anything now.
Okay, let me go ahead and try to share my screen again. Okay. Okay, sharing screen again.
Right. So we're now at the slide with the multiple tech stack logos, basically, that I told you.
Can you see an empty screen now?
Yes, that's an empty screen.
Okay. So I'd just like to start here again, I guess, talk about code generation, a big part of what we're doing here. I guess you guys heard the part about cutting my own hair already. I hope I don't have to jump through it again.
One thing, Matt, as well.
I'd like to make a claim
just
that
jumping in. Sorry about it.
Okay. Misconception number one about both is that code generation is intimidating. When people think of code generation, they think of AI, code writing code, and people think of tools with very steep learning curves. Okay, I hear there's still an echo. Let me see if I can.
So until we get that up and running, guys, I think the problem here that many of you may notice is headphones. So yeah, it would be nice to have like these JBL headphones that Auth0 is giving away. So it's a nice break for some ads, I guess. So it will be awesome. In the meantime, you can of course check out the Auth0 challenge. And I have Matt participating there as well, so that we have we have headphones for the next one for sure. So let's see if we can get the echo out of the way. That will be really helpful, I guess.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, now there's no echo. There's absolutely nothing. Let's try to find what's actually happening here. Apologies, guys, everyone watching. Seems to be some sort of issue here. Accepted.
Okay.
Thanks. Welcome back, man.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, let me share my screen one more time.
Yep. Now we can hear you. That's awesome.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay, let's start again from here. So the first misconception about code generation and about cutting your own hair is that it's intimidating. When people think of code generation, they think of AI, they think of code writing code. Even those that really know code generation think about tools with very steep learning curves. So haircutting is exactly the same. People are very afraid of making mistakes. They're scared of looking like this fella, not wanting to look in the mirror for weeks or ending up with a shaved head. So this is the data, the schema we're going to be working with today. It's very simple. You can see we have a type Barber with a name and a clients array, and a type client with a name and a needs haircut boolean. My first goal is I'd like to generate a TypeScript typings from this schema. If you look closely, it's already very similar, even syntax-wise, to TypeScript typings. So I'd like to go to something like this. Okay, so here, let's enter the GraphQL code generator. And let me just give you a quick demo of this. So here we have our schema. We need some dependencies, including GraphQL Cogen CLI and the TypeScript plugin, and a script, the Cogen, with pointing it to our config. Our config is very simple. A pointer to our schema generates file plugins TypeScript. The plugin just tells the generator to only generate the TypeScript types and not do anything else. So let's try running this and see how it works. Okay, perfect. Let's have a look at the types that were generated. So this might not look exactly like what I showed in the slides, but it kind of maps to the same thing. So these scalars are just kind of an optimization. You see they're pointers to the TypeScript primitives, and the types in our types are references to this scalar's type. So it is actually exactly the same as what we showed in the slides. What's happening here? So we write the schema GraphQL file ourselves. We point the GraphQL code generator to it, and it spits out the types. It's very simple, but actually this is an extremely powerful concept in its own right. Your schema could change. It could be dynamic. You don't want to be running around your code base changing types every single time your schema changes. But there are some limitations to this approach. Namely, this doesn't give us any way to interact with our schema. It doesn't give us any way to write or read data from our data model. Which brings us to our next misconception, is that code generation and haircutting is esoteric, meaning that it's only meant to be understood by a very few people with some very specific knowledge. This is very true with cutting your hair. When you think of haircutting, you might think of a very fancy barbershop. I usually think about $50 haircuts in San Francisco, 700, 800 kroner haircuts in Oslo. And when people think of code gen in this context, they think of the elite of the elite. Who is qualified to write code that writes code? If you've seen the code I write, you know I can barely write my own code. Let's jump into a little bit more complex example to show that even laymen like myself can kind of grasp these concepts. So here, the same schema we're going to be working with. Now what I'd like to generate is some GraphQL queries and mutations, some resolvers to interact with this. To do this, we use a tool called the Neo4j GraphQL library. So let me jump into another quick walkthrough. So here, let me show the schema. It's exactly the same with one small augmentation, this @relationship directive. Now, since we're using Neo4j and it's a graph database, all this tells Neo4j is that there could be edge between clients and barbers with this name, but it doesn't factor too much into what we're doing. I'll do a really quick code walkthrough. This is mostly boilerplate, but what I'd like you to see is that we're importing this Neo4j GraphQL from the library. We're instantiating a Neo4j driver, which just interacts with our database. We're sending this constructor our type definitions from our schema GraphQL file and our driver. And this constructs a schema for us with some extra typings and some default resolvers to work with. We're sending this now to the Apollo server to expose. And now let's jump in and have a look at what this augmented schema looks like. So let's have a quick look at our schema. I hope everyone can see this fine. As you can see, we still have our basic types that we had in the last step, but we also have a lot more. We have a lot of input types, a lot of sorting and filtering options. I don't want to dive too deep into this, but I want you to know that it does still have the simple types that we have in our schema. If we look at the docs, you can see that we have some now queries generated, which conveniently have some filtering and sorting options. We also have some create, read, update, delete operations available. And I want to show now with introspection and IntelliSense how easy it is to write mutations. So let's try, for example, creating a Barber. Let's see what we have. I see we have a create Barbers. What does this take? It takes as input. Create Barbers is plural, so it probably takes an array of Barbers. This probably wants a name. Let's name the Barber Matt. And maybe that's it. Let's see what it wants to return. Barbers makes sense because it should return an array and name. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, perfect. Now let's write a quick query to get this, fetch this data. Very straightforward. What does it want to return? A name and some clients, a name, and it needs haircut. So this shouldn't have any clients, but okay, we have a problem. Let's see. We'll need to find. Oh, I see. I need to name this. Create Barber. Get Barbers. Perfect. Perfect. That works exactly as one would expect. So now let me jump back. So as you can see, that's so easy. You don't have to know the exact API or exactly the shape of the data. It's with introspection and auto generation, IntelliSense, it's very easy to infer it from the documentation. So what's actually going on here? What we're doing is passing our written schema GraphQL file to a Neo4j GraphQL library, which is spitting out an augmented schema. We saw has a bunch of input types, a bunch of kind of utility types attached to it, and some resolvers. We're putting that through Apollo and exposing it via the GraphQL endpoint. Let's move now to a third misconception. It's that code generation and cutting your own hair is limited. You might think so far that it's not that impressive generating TypeScript types. The schema already almost looks like TypeScript types. In basic mutations, it's not that difficult. Most applications are going to want it. Also, what does this have to do with React so far? Oh, let me. Sorry about that. I don't know if this man here cuts his own hair, but I really like to think he does. I think he did a great job. And I would love to see him out in public like this. So here we have our same schema and our same queries and mutations. I just added names to them. Wouldn't it be nice now if we could create some React hooks based on these? An example would be a create Barber Apollo mutation that returns the mutation and the data loading error states, or even simply a get Barbers query with the data loading error states. So here we can put the two things together. So let me jump now back to the code. And let's see. So if you notice here, we need these operations defined. These are the same operations that we just defined in the last step using the introspection and auto-generation IntelliSense. I simply made them a bit more flexible by adding variables to them. So I also added a couple more. So we have a mutation now for create Barber, a mutation for creating client, a mutation for getting Barbers, and Barbers have a link to clients, an array of clients. So I added a mutation to add a client to a Barber. Let's now walk through the GraphQL Cogen config that we're going to look at. So this is a bit more complex now, but let's walk through it. Now we're generating two files, one for the types, which is the exact same as it was before. It's just also typing our operations that we wrote. We're also writing a hooks file, and this uses the TypeScript React Apollo plugin. So let's try this. Oh, also one more thing. Notice that we're not pointing to the schema that we wrote now. We're actually pointing to the deployed schema from the last step. So this is also going to get all the additional features, the augmented schema from Neo4j. Okay, so let's have a bit of a look in this. I don't want to get into the types because we looked at them before, but let's have a quick look at the hooks. So as you can see, this is quite intimidating. It's a little bit boilerplatey even, but the documentation is quite good. As you can see, this is very straightforward. This is exactly what we're looking for. So I would be remiss now if I didn't show you how this works within an app. So I'd like to show you a very mature, a very production-ready application that I've created called the Cogen Barbershop. So I hope everybody can see this fine. It's very simple. I'd like to have a list of the barbers, and I'd also like functionality to add a client to a barber. What this should do is create a new client as well as use our mutation for adding clients to Barber. So let's go back to the code and let's see what we can do here. And I'd just like to show how easy it is to do these things with IntelliSense and with our TypeScript typings. TypeScript really enables the application developer here. So I don't really know the API so well here, but let's see if we can rely on the IntelliSense and the documentation. So right now I want to populate that list of barbers. So let's go use get barbers query. Okay, I'm not really sure what this returns, but since it's a query, I'm expecting it returns kind of a data loading error state. Okay, nothing so bad so far. Let's quickly use these loading and error states. So if let's return H3 with, and if error, let's do the same thing. Okay, now we have our two elements, the barbers list and the add client, the barber form. You can see the barbers list takes in a prop, which is barbers. So let's try to get that from the data. It could be null, so let's just be safe. And if it is, let's return an array. Okay, looks good, no complaints. Perfect, so now this can see the barber that we created in the last step in the mutations from GraphQL Playground, but the clients are empty. So let's try to add functionality now to A, create clients, and B, to add clients to barbers. So again, I'm not sure what the mutation API will look like, but let's do use create client mutation, and let's just see what it needs. Okay, so it receives a mutation function and the data loading error states. I'm not going to use the data loading error states because we already used them before to save time, but let's get the create client mutation. Okay, and let's populate this function. Let's first create a client, and let's see what this wants. It wants options, so probably an object. Variables, okay, this is probably the client info. The name, perfect. Oh, name should be client name. Perfect. So let's do the same thing now with adding a client to a Barber. Oh. Use add client to Barber mutation. Add client to Barber mutation. And let's do the same thing here. So let's await. This is probably going to take a similar shaped object, some variables, which wants a client name and a Barber name. Perfect. Let's also take a refetch on the Barbers. If you're familiar with Apollo, this is pattern's quite common. And let's see if that works. So what I want to do is now add a client, let's say Matt, to the Barber Matt, which makes sense because I cut my own hair sometimes. And perfect. It populated the client's list. So I just want everybody to see how easy that is. I'm not super familiar with these APIs. I don't know exactly what these are from a code generator, but they're so easy to use with the generated documentation. Let me jump back to the presentation. So how was this working? This was the same as before. This is the same diagram as before. We're passing in the schema GraphQL, Neo4j is spitting out an augmented schema, which we're feeding to Apollo and exposing via a GraphQL endpoint. But now we're taking the schema from that deployed GraphQL endpoint, feeding it into the code generator, and that's spitting out TypeScript types and React hooks that we consume in our React application. This is like, it feels like magic to me. It makes it so easy for application developers, especially that aren't so familiar with APIs. So you might be thinking that you still have to manually write the schema GraphQL file. How is this add flexibility? Well, what we do in our application is we now let the user input their schema. We take the schema in our server code, run it through the Neo4j GraphQL library, pass them back the deployed schema through the augmented schema through Apollo, and they can generate their React types, their TypeScript types, and their React hooks through this endpoint. So what could be next steps? Back to data-intensive industries. Data-intensive industries don't operate quite the same as tech. Sometimes they're behind. These are industries like oil and gas, shipping, manufacturing. They might not always know the latest tech. So is there a way that we could write an abstraction layer that takes away the need for the application developers to know GraphQL? The best thing is that they know their data so well. We don't know their data that well. We need to be adaptable. Also, we're working on a very comprehensive data ingestion journey to populate the schema. So some last words on Cogen and flexibility. What does Cogen, why is Cogen a tool that enables flexibility? Again, with an approach like this, the app developers can define their schemas. They know their data best. Some takeaways. I'd just like to reiterate that flexibility is so important. As mentioned today, your data changes. Data models change. It's important to adapt to these scenarios. Also, flexibility enabling tools like GraphQL Cogen, like this Neo4j GraphQL library, code generation in general, These tools are great, and there's also a lot of room for customization and configuration. Also, you might be thinking, does this only work with React? I know most of us here are React developers, but this also works with, I saw a plugin for Vue, a plugin for Android. I don't think that one gets used very much. Also for even Java and things like that. I'd also like to tell you that cutting your hair is quite a viable option. It's not that difficult to do. I actually think it looks pretty good in the mirror. As long as nobody's looking at me from behind, then I'm fine. So again, my name is Matt Murphy. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. And I'd like to apologize for the technical difficulties we had at the beginning. I work as a software engineer here at Cognite, where there's lots of great opportunities to work with some really great people. So reach out to me if you're interested. Thank you to all the other amazing speakers and the organizers too. I know it's a lot of work to put something like this together. And I think we now have still a few minutes for questions. I hope everyone can still hear me. I wasn't just rambling on for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, we can hear you, Matt. Thanks for the very helpful tip on cutting our own hair. But it's yep, I actually tried that myself. We actually have a couple of questions, and thank you for the talk. Of course, it was we got some really great feedback from the guys. Everyone said thumbs up, great tool. So thanks for giving us an example there. We got a couple of questions. Actually, I'm not sure if you can see them, but I can just keep you reading it. We got one is basically, can we disable a few of the mutations from the generated code if we don't want them to be visible, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. These generated resolvers and things like that can definitely be disabled. They can also be overridden. So a lot of time in our code, we don't want the exact functionality, like for maybe creating types. What we want to do is reach into Neo4j and do some kind of custom work. So we override some of these. They can also be disabled if you want, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Another one would be, do we need to know a lot of this tool to get started? Like, what was your experience to work with it? Do you think that you need some kind of extreme knowledge in the subject, or
great question?
Is it generally easy to work with?
A great question. I think like one of the misconceptions is that tools like this are difficult to understand. That's not the case. I only started using these like very recently. They're very quick to grasp at first. They're very iterative. They're easy to approach. And kind of as you start doing it, you start reaching for more and reaching for more, and you continuously learn on top of it. Definitely, they're very easy to learn, and not just for people with a lot of experience in the field.
Nice. And the last one that I see here, actually, of course, you mentioned that for Java, but do you think that you got something like this GraphQL Cogen for RESTful APIs that you might know of?
Yeah, this is a great question. So things like Neo4j, for example, and graph databases, those aren't unique to GraphQL. Isn't unique to those. So there's lots of great tools out there that build things like this, like GraphQL APIs on top of like Postgres databases, for example. I know there's a really great tool out there called Asura that's gaining a lot of traction. And this kind of has a lot of feature parity with the way we're implementing Neo4j.
Awesome. That was the last one, actually. So yeah, I think we're good here. Again, for apologies to all of you guys watching for the at least initial, let's say, setup issues. But we got that working. It was a great talk, Matt. It's really liked it. Learned actually the tool myself. I've never seen it before. So thanks. And everyone is clapping, of course, in the chat. So thank you very much for this. Again, guys, we'll have around a 15-ish minute break before our next talk with Håkon. We'll see you there. In the meantime, of course, you can go check out the challenge from Auth0, and of course, you can see also the job listings in the React Norway website that that are posted. So be sure to check them out. and hopefully all will go well, and we'll see each other again in around 15-ish minutes. Thanks, Matt, again. It was great to have you here.
Thank you, guys.
It was awesome, and have a great rest of the day, Matt.